Welcome to Prosperity Playbook. We are four friends that came together with life lessons and life experiences to share with you and each other so that we can all learn what not to do. So today we are talking about how to break free from credit card debt and what makes up your credit score, lots of different helpful tips.
Yeah, so I think before we start diving into the actual credit card piece of it, let's talk about what does make up your credit score. So everybody knows that 35% of your score is payment history. Maybe you don't know it's that percentage, but we all know making your payments on time is an important thing, right? So the length of your credit history is also important. That's about 15% of that. And then there's inquiries and the length of your credit. Those are each about 10%. But there's a little known chunk of this, and it's actually a big chunk. It's about a third of your score. That is actually what is the balance on your credit card when your statement cuts in relationship to that limit. And think of it as a percent. And the higher that percentage is, the more it's going to hit your credit because it looks like a maxed out card. So I know this is kind of a weird topic, but I think it's really important. So I want to dive in on this just a little bit more.
Can you give us like a example of what that would look like? So you open your credit card statement and what does that look like?
So if you have a credit card with a limit of $5,000 and you run that balance up to $4,000 every month, the credit card company is going to report that $4,000. It's going to show whatever your statement cuts. So when you look at your statement, there's going to be a date range and it'll say August 1st, August 31st, or whatever. The last date in that is the date that statement cuts. So it's not how low you pay your card to every month. It's whatever the balance was when that cuts, which is usually about the highest that your balance gets. So if you have a $5,000 limit and you have $4,000 that's owed on that card, that's 80% of the limit that you've used up. And that looks like the maxed out credit card, and that can actually hit you like 80 or 90 points on your score. So it's actually huge. Even if you've never made a late payment in your life, you've had good credit, this is something that can really get people. And I'll see this most often where people, they have some sort of credit monitoring service and they see, oh, man, my score really tanked this month. I don't know what happened. That's almost always what it was. It was either Christmas and they put a bunch of stuff on their card, or they booked a trip or something like that. So something to be aware of is that is a huge chunk of your credit score. So if
you're talking about, that's not the balance you're carrying. You're paying that off at the end of the month, but that's what the balance was when the statement was made.
Exactly right. Even if you pay it in full every month, that is not what gets reported. It's whatever the balance was on that statement closing date.
Mm-hmm. If you're going to pay it in full, you should just pay it in full the day before the closing date.
That's exactly right. Yep. And that's exactly what I was just going to say. That's okay. That's the best hack is figure out on your statement, go look up what that statement closing date is and set up your automatic payment for before that, or go online and look it up, pay it before you actually get that statement, and then it will report what the balance was on that date. So do it 2 or 3 days before that statement cuts and you'll be at that lower amount, and it will make a huge, huge difference in your credit score. So if you're getting ready to apply for something like a new car or a new house, that's a great way to pop your credit score, maximize it right before.
I'm going to have to go look at my statement now because I've been carrying about an 800 plus credit score for years, and I don't know what I do right and what I do wrong.
Well, you might have a really high limit on the cards. That's the other thing is
I
that
keep reducing them.
Oh, you
I don't want it to be
okay, well, you're going to start seeing your score drop then.
No, I do it all the time. I
Something
mean, like, they'll try to bump it up to 18,000, and it makes me worried that if somebody got a hold of my credit, like the Social Security thing that just happened where they got all of our Social Security numbers, and I get worried that somebody's going to be able to run up my credit card $18,000. Is that true?
I mean, well, first of all of our Social Security numbers have been on the dark web for a long time. Right. So don't freak out about these new breaches because I promise you it's already out there. Yeah. They already have all of that information if they really want it. Everything's for sale for a price. So the newest, latest breach, honestly, I didn't even bat an eye at it. But here's the great thing about credit cards. They're really good about fraud. If somebody goes and starts running up your card, like I have had that happen to me so many times where a cards get, like a physical card gets stolen or just the numbers. Exactly. Every year. And it's a pain in the butt usually to have to deal with it. But I've never once been on the hook for 1 penny of any of that. So I actually don't stress about that in my credit cards. I think it's better to have a good high balance on that. Now, that being said, if you're, just out of college, that's probably not your best plan to have an $18,000 credit card limit. But but for people that have established credit and have proven that they can do it, it's not a bad thing to do. And if you are somebody that runs your credit card up to a high limit or a high balance every month, raising that limit is one way to help that, or split it between 2 separate cards, and so that that ratio stays lower.
Something that was really interesting for me is, I mean, just credit in general is a really interesting concept because, for example, when Forrest and I were getting ready to buy our house, he had a lot of money in savings. He had been gifted a couple of investment accounts from his grandpa. Like, he was very well off financially and is way smarter with his finances than I am. You know, I'm definitely a spender and he's a saver. So his financial portfolio looked beautiful, but he barely had any credit because he had never had a credit card and had never had to take a loan out for anything because he always saved up enough money to be able to pay for it in cash, which is obviously so smart.
That's kind of a common thing. People assume that their income and their assets are part of their credit score, and it's actually not. It has nothing to do with it. It's only the debts that you borrow. So if you don't borrow any money, your credit score will be 0.
Your debit card does not count.
Your debit card does not count because you're spending your own money. So the credit bureaus like to see that you have access to credit, but that you can use it responsibly. So that's the deal with the credit cards. And it always frustrates people. They're like, I should have a better credit score because I don't have any credit cards. But usually the reason that people don't want credit cards is because they've been in trouble with them before and they don't trust themselves around it. And the credit bureaus know that. So the key is have it, don't use it. If you are somebody that's been in trouble with credit cards before, get a $500 credit limit card. Get one, put 1 tank of gas on it per month, set it up on an automatic payment, and leave that freaking card in the freezer or somewhere else locked up that you don't actually use it and you can't get out of hand on it.
So is that what people should do to establish credit when they are getting started? Like when you were working with my son and he didn't have a credit card and they wouldn't give him one. So I don't think we were doing it right.
Well, there's a couple different ways to tackle that. So yes, the answer is you want to get, as soon as your kids turn 18, a credit card should be something that you get them and teach them about. So
They can do it even younger, can't they, Renee?
maybe there are some out there. To my knowledge, you
Where
have to
was
be
that
18.
school that was handing out $8,000 school credit cards?
I mean, when I turned 16 and started driving, my parents added me onto their credit card account.
I think you can be an authorized user earlier than 18, and it might depend on the credit card company. But I think in order to have your own credit card, it's 18, but I'm actually not sure on that. So the best thing to do, though, is if you can't get your own credit card, get added as a co-borrower on a parent's credit card because you actually get the whole history for that card. So it's kind of like almost a cheating way to do it. It's a hack to have that added there. But if you can't get your own card, usually Capital One is pretty lenient. I mean, you can actually just Google this or chat GPT it and say, what's the best credit card to get if I don't have any credit? And it will tell you the ones that are the best ones to get in there.
Capital One, I hear a lot.
And the other thing you can do is you can get what's called a secured card. And usually you go to your bank that you already have an established relationship with, and they may do a regular card for you based on your relationship with them. But if they won't, then they can do what's called a secured credit card. And basically it kind of is like a debit card. They're taking your money and they're collateralizing it, meaning if I give you a secured credit card for $500 and you don't pay it back, then I'm taking this $500 out of your account. So that is usually a really easy way to get in because they're not going to say no to that because they're holding your money.
Yeah. Chime Bank does that. They've got like this credit builder card.
Yes.
And it's basically like a debit card, but they report to all the credit bureaus.
Yep.
Yeah.
Chime's another really good one. Absolutely.
Which one is the one where you get money if you do your chores?
Like the green light debit card?
Oh, yeah, green light.
You know what? Actually, that's a great point. We did a green light debit card for my daughter. She still has it. I don't remember how long ago we did it for her, but it was one of the best things that we did because it really started teaching her about how much money coming in, money going out, because she always had a bank account and like, you know, the little savings book, and she's not going to fill that out. Nobody does that anymore. And if it's not on their phone, that's not cool. So when you get this green light debit card app, then she was able to see how much money she had, how much she spends. And then it also notifies me. I know exactly where my daughter has lunch every day because I see how much it's happening coming through real time. And you can change it for younger kids. Like this only works at Target. This only works at the gas station, whatever else. They can learn how to save. There's an investment thing you can turn on. They can do donations. It's actually a super, super cool program. So I highly recommend it. I think it's like $5 a month or something, and not a sponsored post, by the way. I pay them, but it is a good way just for them to kind of get started. And speaking of her buying lunch every day, she's been working this summer, and I was like, man, you've burned through a lot of money just eating lunch. And she was like, well, it's only like a couple bucks here and there. But by the time you do it every single day, and then maybe you grab a coffee on your way to work, like you can blow through your whole paycheck really fast. So it's a good way for her to really see how much money she spent.
Totally.
So back to establishing credit. So yeah, the sooner you can, the better, because I do see this happen. Now, if you don't have credit and you're trying to buy a house, there are ways to do that. We can build you a non-traditional credit report sometimes where we look at your rent payment or your cell phone bill or your insurance. However, what I find is most of the time if people don't have credit, those bills are in their parents' name too. So it doesn't usually work. But if it does, you usually get a little bit higher interest rate just because it is considered to be higher risk. So I know Dave Ramsey likes to tell you don't need credit. I think that's bullshit. And you will get a lot better interest rate. Right. And if you are wanting to start a business and you need a commercial loan, they will not give you anything if you don't have a credit score. So it's one of the most important things that you can have. And it's important to do it the right way, because once you mess it up, like you can mess up your credit really fast and make your score tank, but it's really slow to build it up. Yeah. So I think knowing about those credit cards and doing it the right way. So parents, help your kids understand how this works. When I was in college, I remember a fundraiser that we were doing, and we were literally walking around campus giving people credit card applications to fill out. First of all, this is the dumbest breach of data ever, because you're just handing a college kid all of your social security number, date of birth, everything else. But we didn't know. And so we were getting people to fill these out. And my roommate at the time had terrible credit, by the way. And she was the one in charge of this fundraiser. So she was telling everybody, just fill this out. Even if you think you have bad credit and you're not going to get approved, then I'm going to get paid for this and it'll be fine. But what I know now that I didn't know then is that if you have bad credit and somebody's pulling your credit, that makes your credit worse. So, which actually is an interesting thing to mention really quick. I have people almost every single day, somebody asks me, I don't know if I want you to pull my credit because it might hurt my credit. Well, the real answer is if you have good credit and people are pulling your credit, that's not going to hurt you very much. It might hit you 1 or 2 points. But for the most part, the credit bureaus are like, okay, you can handle what you have. Like you want to go buy a house? No big deal. Great, do it. It's if you don't have good credit and then people start pulling your credit, then it looks like a cry for help, because the credit bureaus are like, what are you doing? You can't handle the credit that you have. Don't go get more things. And so that's when it will start hitting your credit score.
So if you're car shopping, you can let them pull your credit.
Yeah.
Or if you're shopping for lenders, they can pull your credit, and it's not going to ding you that much if it's all within the same time frame, right?
Correct. I mean, there are nebulous windows, and those depend on the credit bureau. Some are 14 days, some are 45 days. But yes, in theory, you have a window of shopping opportunity for a car loan or a mortgage. If you go get a car loan from a dealership, if you look at your credit report, chances are you're going to see like 15 different inquiries on there, because they're going to shop it to a whole bunch of different possible lenders and see who's going to give you the best deal.
Well, and you can check your credit score for free, right? Like once a year or something like that?
Yeah. Yep. The best way to do that is annualcreditreport.com. You can get on there once per year for free for each of the 3 credit bureaus, and you can get your score and your report. And it's a smart thing to do, just to check it and see. Keep in mind, if you have Credit Karma or something like that, or your credit card statement gives you a credit score, that's a good way to track your score, but that's probably not your exact credit score if you go to buy a car or a house. There's different algorithms for everything, so those are all going to show up a little bit different. And Credit Karma is a for-profit company. They know that you want to see that your score looks better. So they use a little bit different algorithm than we do that makes your score look better than what it typically does when you go to get a mortgage.
Well, and I think the thing that becomes really hard is once you get yourself in trouble with credit cards, it becomes so hard to get out of that, because then you're working against the current. Yeah. You all of a sudden you're paying really high interest on your cards. And so making the minimum payment is no longer enough, because basically you're making that minimum payment and you are only paying the interest, because your payment applies first to interest and then to your principal balance. Right. And then with your score dropping, then you're going to have trouble consolidating your debt, and maybe you're not going to be able to get more credit. And so it's all of a sudden it feels like you're really working against the current. When I was in college, the very first credit card that I got, they gave me an $8,000 limit on, which was a horrible idea. And I took full advantage of it, maxed out my credit card, and then I spent years and years and years trying to pay it off and felt like I was just constantly battling it. And I celebrated like I won the world championship when I paid that credit card off because it had been such a battle. But I think, I didn't know. I didn't know that my interest was going to be so high. I was paying 26% interest on this card, and that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, and that's very normal for credit card companies. And I don't think people actually really realize that. But look at your statement. Just see what it is. It's very likely over 20%. And if you pay your card in full every single month, you're not paying any interest on that. But if at that 1 month, and this is what happened, and I kind of talked about this on the last episode a little bit, where my husband and I kind of had a disagreement about who was or how much it cost to run our household, and where I'm commissioned and he's self-employed. There was a month that we couldn't pay everything off. And so I was like, okay, no big deal. I'll have a big commission check next week or next month and we'll just pay it back then. Well, I couldn't quite get the whole thing down then. And it snowballed so fast, I didn't even know what happened. And it actually has happened to me twice in my life. And I feel like clients come in a lot of times and they're very nervous and they're embarrassed of their credit card debt. Man, it happens so fast. It's not necessarily something to be ashamed of. It's about, let's figure out what your mountain is and how we fix it. So I guess let's talk about that. How do we fix it? So there's a couple of strategies to talk about. The first thing is that interest rate. Call your credit card company and ask them to lower it. I know that sounds stupid, but as we talked about on a couple episodes ago, the answer is no unless you ask. So there's a very good chance that if you call them and ask them to lower your interest rate, that they will do it. And you will be surprised at how much that adds up, that you can start paying things down faster.
You can also potentially even negotiate the balance.
Correct. And that's another thing, especially medical debt. This is another one I see that accumulates a lot. That if you have medical debt that's piling up, call them and try to renegotiate, because they will almost always work with you on that. So just try.
I was thinking also to be careful when you buy something. Like I went to Best Buy in Billings a long time ago and we bought a TV, the whole setup. And it was 12 months, same as cash. And so I applied for that and got that all set up. We didn't know that they were charging us the 26% interest. And so I called them after my husband had paid the first month, and I noticed that they were charging us that much interest. So I called, what is that one? HBS Bank?
HSBC?
Yeah, that one. And they said, oh, you have to return everything and they need to repull your credit. And I was like, that is absolutely ridiculous. We had to drive 2 hours in a snowstorm, spend the night in Big Timber to get this home from Santa. I am not returning it and telling my son Santa had to return your TV.
Will you open the door and talk
ask
to
them
them?
to not do that, please.
Where are they?
Maybe in the court.
Hey, you guys not hit the building?
Makes more sense that it was a court. I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
Well, I think they were
Yeah.
hitting it over the fence to us.
Well, I think that's a good point, Courtney. I think it's a buyer beware situation. Just make sure when you do sign up for something like that, that you know exactly what you're getting into. A lot of times you'll see this 12 months, same as cash or no interest. And as long as you pay it in full before that date, then you maybe don't have the interest. But if you wait until after the date, that 12 months or whatever that term was, you'll get interest back till the beginning of it. So I've seen people get in trouble with that before, where they think they're going to have the ability to pay it off and then something happens and they can't.
Right.
And
Yeah,
then
it was Worst Buy. They're supposedly coming to Bozeman.
Yeah, they are. They're going in where
let
Bed
them
Bath & Beyond
have
was. So, okay. So if we've got credit card debt, it's happened, life happens, right? So we talked about asking for a lower rate. We've talked about potentially asking them to lower your balance. There's a couple different strategies out there that different people like as far as what is the best way to get credit cards paid down fastest. I personally like the snowball strategy. What that means is that you pick off the lowest card first. So you're going to pay, you're still making your minimum payments on all your cards, but whichever one has your lowest balance, you're going to pay as much extra as you have that month on just that card. Again, keep paying your minimums on the other one so you don't get late payments, but start checking off that smallest one first. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, it feels good. You're going to feel progress. You're going to get that one paid off and you're going to be like, oh, hey, I did it. Let's celebrate. And you're going to feel that momentum. Then once that one's gone, now you move to the next lowest one. And now you're able to chip more away at that because the minimum payment on that last one's gone. So it works really well. Some people say start with your highest interest rate. I think that's defeating because that's the one that you're going to pay off the slowest. So start with those smaller ones, get in that habit, figure out what it takes. And another thing to do is like see if you have some extra things laying around that you can sell, figure out how you can put big chunks towards that. There you go. Yep. Poshmark.
Well, and then once you pay off that smallest card, you will have been used to paying that much on top of the minimum payment. So then you get to make that payment plus the minimum payment on the next card, which then makes the snowball that much bigger and pays off that next card that much faster.
And y'all were talking about earlier how to do that. And Renee, you had certain steps of what to pay off or what to pay first, and then your credit cards.
So this comes up a lot for me when clients are paying extra on their mortgages. And I've said this a few times already, but if you have a 2 or 3% rate, stop it. Don't pay extra on your mortgage. That's the cheapest money you'll ever borrow. People that are trying to buy houses right now at 6 and 7% hate you. So please don't pay off that mortgage. Keep it. Do something else with your money. So here's what my personal philosophy is on this. I think the number one goal for everybody is a cash cushion. So even before you start wiping out those credit cards, put a little something in savings, because if you don't have that in savings, what happens?
Murphy's Law.
Murphy's Law. Something else happens and you're going to be running more things up on a credit card.
Your car breaks. That is always what happens.
Yeah. Exactly.
Emergency fund always first. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So number one thing, build a savings account. And extra credit if you do it at an account that's not your normal bank, so that you don't look at that account every single day. You've got it somewhere else. You're just chunking it away.
I highly recommend making that account a high yield savings account so that it's gaining 4% interest.
Totally. Absolutely.
Or whatever
agree.
the rate is at the time.
Yeah.
Yep. It's good to find that. I mean, most of the time you can find those at online banks because they don't have the big brick and mortar to pay for. So they can give you higher rates on that stuff. So definitely check that out. Number one, cash cushion, most important financial tool I think anybody can have. Number two is start paying off debts. Credit cards, auto loans, student loans, kind of in that order. Wiping out those credit cards is going to feel good, and it's also going to give you a lot more cash flow. And then the third thing is retirement accounts and investment accounts. So pretty much everybody is behind on retirement savings, right? Like there's no more retire with a gold watch and a pension. We got to build our own retirement accounts. So if you have extra money that you're trying to put somewhere, put it in those retirement accounts, because that is going to have longer to grow. You're going to get the magic of compounding interest, and you're going to have that still as a cash cushion if you needed it. Your retirement accounts aren't super liquid, but most of them you can borrow from in a real emergency. And if you're somebody like me that wants to retire early, if you have a retirement account set up, also start a separate investment account. Here's why. Because if I want to retire early and all my retirement assets are in qualified plans that I can't take out without penalty until I hit certain ages, that it doesn't really work very well. So if you have a goal to retire early, or you want a little bit more liquidity with that money, open a separate brokerage account or investment account. Talk to your financial advisor about that. They'll hook you up with that. You can still take advantage of the good rates of return, have some liquidity, and it's still there growing for you. And then hopefully you can retire early.
Yeah. And going back to the school debt, when do you know if you should be paying that down? Or I hear this all the time. I don't know if I should be paying on my school debt, or do I just pay the minimum amount? Do I pay it off?
That is such a good question. And I think that totally depends on individual situations. So if you think you're somebody who their debt might be forgiven, their student debt, then it's probably would definitely be my last priority of what to pay off. Is like if you work for a nonprofit or some public service, teachers, cops, firemen, that kind of a thing. I think there are certain programs. So if you have that, I would definitely not be trying to pay extra on that. If you are somebody, that's Dr. or dentists or people like that just have a lot of student loans, like you want to start chunking away at those as soon as you can. But I think it depends on your interest rate and it depends on the program that you have these on. And we talked about this a couple of episodes ago, but if you have a student loan and you have not put it on the SAVE program yet, you need to go in and do that if you're on income-based repayment. Because
What is that?
So it's a program that Biden put together, and it's for student loans. And basically the biggest difference between that and the old one. If you had income-based repayment before, if you were paying less than the minimum interest, the rest of that interest was getting tacked on to your balance. So your balance was growing, which is icky. And I had people all the time that had double the student loans and they didn't even know it was happening. So the SAVE program fixes that for most people. It takes that interest and it forgives it as long as you're making your income-based minimum repayment. So definitely something to check into. SAVE, SAVE. If you just Google it, you can check it out and see what's in there.
Going back to credit cards too, something that was really useful for me, I had 3 separate credit cards at one point, and one of them had a really high balance while the other 2 I was paying them off every month. And I received an offer on one of them that I was paying off every month to do a balance transfer. So I was able to transfer all of the debt that had been on my high balance credit card with a 20% interest rate. I was able to transfer it to this credit card. I had a 9% interest rate for a set period of time before that interest rate went back up. But that way I was able to make those payments on that balance at a much lower interest rate for a set period of time and paid it off much faster than I would have. I know there's a lot of debt consolidation programs like that available. Or I have talked to people too that have gotten a personal loan where, maybe they'll have 6% interest, which is, it's still interest, but it's much less than 26% interest, where you can get a personal loan for the amount of debt that you have on those credit cards, pay off all of those credit cards, and then make your payments on that loan instead.
Yep, that's a great point. The transferring balances can be a really good thing. A lot of times you'll get 0% offers. The thing you need to make sure that you're aware of on that is they a lot of times have a balance transfer fee. And it's a lot of times maybe 1, 2, 3% of the balance. You're probably still money ahead to do that because you're getting out of the 23% interest. And if you can transfer that to 0% ideally, but even if it's 9%, you're going to check that off a lot lower or a lot faster than you would if you're paying 26%.
And you don't want to make it a habit of doing that, because I used to do that when I first got started, and I had no idea it was detrimental to your credit too, to keep transferring your balances and opening new cards and canceling cards. So don't you want to open a card and then have credit history with that particular card throughout your life if you can?
Yeah, that's a great point. So that 15% chunk is how long is your credit history again? And that is if you have one of those shady cards you got in college, keep that baby open for the length of your credit history. And I say that jokingly, but you're exactly right. If you have a card and you transfer the balance to a new card and then you close the other card, you lose all the history from that card and you're starting back over with a new card. And it takes about 6 months for any trade line to actually start reporting a score for you because it needs that much history for the algorithm to even work. So
or what if you don't close it and all of a sudden you have 10, 20 cards in a couple years?
Yeah, and you can do that. It won't necessarily hurt you to have that many cards. The hard part about that is if you do get one stolen, it's harder to keep track of, or you might miss a minimum payment on one if you don't have them on automatic payments. By the way, store cards, this is a cautionary tale because it's happened to me and a lot of other people that I know where you have a store card, a Victoria's Secret or a Kohl's card or something like that you don't use that often. So that's a very easy payment to overlook. And I personally had one on a Kohl's card a couple of years ago that I'd never used that card. I went and bought a bunch of donation gifts at Christmas and then didn't see the statement come through, missed the payment, had a late payment on my credit report. And as you can imagine, I was rather furious at myself. And also just, you're trying to do a good thing, no good deed goes unpunished, I guess. But and that takes forever for that to come off of your credit. So those little store cards, either make sure that you know when you put something on it and put a note on your calendar to pay it, or set it up at least for a minimum payment to come out automatically so that you don't end up missing something on those.
And there are credit cards I use, Bank of America, World Points. and you get a credit once you pay off your balance each month. And so I just apply that credit back to my statement for the next month.
Great.
And end of the year, you've gotten like $1,200 if you use it a lot. I use it for business. I have one for traveling and one for our investment property, so I can keep everything separated.
Perfect. Yeah, and that is something, credit card points can be a great thing. They can also be a trap too. Like people think they're getting a good deal by putting everything on their credit card and getting the points. Well, if you're not paying that balance, you are not getting a good deal. If your rate is 26% and you paid $100 for something and you don't pay that balance, that thing just cost you $126 the next month. And then if you don't pay it then, it continues to cost you more and more money.
I always pay it off.
Yeah, exactly. So just something to be aware of. Make sure if you're putting big expenses on there to gain the points that you have a method of being able to get those paid back off quickly.
Yes. I think somebody is trying to kick us out of the studio so we can play their video games again.
I think you're right. So, all right. Well, I think that gives us a pretty good discussion on credit anyway. Moral of the story, your credit's important. Do the right things from the start. Don't start out the wrong way. Make sure you have some good conversations around that. And one last thing that Britt brought up was consolidation companies. So I'm sure there are some good legit companies out there that will help you consolidate debt. But there are a whole lot of scam companies out there that will do it. So be very, very careful if you're going to go down the road with them. There were companies for a while that they would say, okay, I'm going to take over all your bills. You pay me one payment and then we'll take care of everything else. What they would do is go in and then not make your payment so that you got way behind on them. And then they'd go to your credit card companies and try to negotiate because they were like, well, you're not getting paid at all. What if we give you this? And then they would negotiate that debt down, which seems positive, but now you've just trashed your credit in the meantime. So it's, again, a buyer beware situation on that. Make sure that you understand whether it's a credit repair company or a consolidation company, what you're getting into.
I thought of one other question, too. When is it an okay idea to pay off credit card debt with a home equity line of credit or a refinance?
That's an awesome question. Almost always it's better to get rid of that because 10 grand on a mortgage is about $65 a month. 10 grand on a credit card is probably $400 a month. So on a cash flow basis, that can be a great thing. Now, if you're sitting at a 2% rate and you have one credit card for $10,000 and your mortgage is at 2%, that's not going to be worth it for you. If you are looking at a big pile of credit card debt, in fact, I had a client this week that had a business that failed, and she had a whole bunch of debts that she had accumulated, and she was super embarrassed by it. And I encouraged her not to be, but to share her experience and what had happened. And we did a cash out refinance for them. We took them from a rate in the 4s to a rate in the 7s, which of course doesn't feel great, but their net monthly cash flow changed by $2,900 a month.
Whoa.
And that's just a home equity line, right?
That actually, we did a full refinance for her because where her credit score was, it wasn't high enough to qualify for a home equity line of credit. It wasn't even close, in fact. And so what we did is an actual cash out refinance. I have this magic loan program where if you have a low credit score and your spouse has a high one, we can average it and still make it work. But it was $2,900 a month difference between her credit cards and her auto loan. So even though her mortgage payment went up, she got rid of everything else. And all she had left was a mortgage payment. So there's not an exact rule of thumb to when you should do that. But the answer is have somebody look at it.
Yeah.
Have a loan officer that you trust that knows what they're doing. Talk to you about it, and we can run the math and show you if it's a full refinance, if it's a home equity line of credit, if it's a fixed second mortgage, or if you should just keep hammering away on those credit cards.
Mm-hmm. And you might be able to write off that mortgage interest.
You might be able to.
Got to check with your tax accountant.
Yeah. Home equity indebtedness is something that's been on the chopping block for a while, but yes, definitely check with your accountant on that one.
Yep. And speaking of that, go out and vote in November and do your research prior to. Don't just watch the TV. So thank you for joining us today. And Britt, what do we always say?
Here's to empowering each other one story at a time.